Right, so I pick up from here.
Around the world. My name is Mark Beppel. I'm the host of the First Friday Wappler Meetups. We meet on the first Friday of every month at 4 p.m. Netherlands time. You can find information about the meetups on the in the community section. Just search for Meetup. You can also find past videos of the meetups thanks to Ben Pleasure from Down Under on the Wappler YouTube channel. If any Wapplers are out there that would like to invest some time, promote yourself, and promote this excellent tool of Wappler and like to present on a specific topic, please feel free to reach out to Mark One on the forum. And for those new to Wappler, Wappler is a very powerful low-code web app development tool. Allows developers to make extremely complex sites very easily and very quickly. And today I would like to introduce Scott Clee, who has a wonderful tool in addition to make things even faster. And I'm going to turn it over to Scott.
Thank you very much. Good to see you all again. Some familiar faces and a handful of new ones. Let me attempt to share my screen. There we go. Okay, let me know if that's working.
Yes, Wappler and Impress.
Excellent. Okay, right. So I've introduced myself many times in the previous meetings, but I'll go over it quickly again. My name is Scott Clee. I have worked in tech for 20 plus years. Spent a long time with IBM. I spent nearly as much time with Barclays Capital in Canary Wharf in London. Then I worked in cybersecurity, and then I moved into the no-code space. During that time, I've seen frameworks and development tools evolve. I even remember at one point writing HTML in Notepad, right at the very beginning. But as well as the evolution of the tooling up to where no code is today, processes evolved also. And in my own development process, I adopted user-centered design a few years ago. And so that led me to discover a tool called Figma. So most of you might be aware of what Figma is. Back when I was using it, it was a popular tool for creating designs. I believe now it's basically the de facto tool across the world for anyone who wants to build their designs. It's an amazing tool. And I fell in love with it. And so I used it as part of my user-centered design process. And so in that, I was capturing user journeys with clients. And then I was drawing the designs for them in Figma and sharing those designs with the clients. And when they were signed off, those designs approved, I then had to build them. And I always felt like I've already built them once. Now I have to go and build that UI again in a separate tool set. And so I was really just had the dream and the vision of not having to do that and just building it once in Figma. And so that led me on to Impress, to create an Impress. And I wanted to focus on specifically the Figma design and converting it into something. I didn't necessarily want to rebuild all of the back end, all of the application infrastructure, etc. So I was already working in the no-code space. And so I set out to find, probably a couple of years ago now, what was the best no-code tool on the platform, no-code tool in the world. So what did I find? I found Wappler. I've sung its praises before. It just gives you so much out of the box. It gives you freedom of deployment, and everything that comes out of it, anything that's generated out of it, is yours to keep. And so, in the no-code space, I've spent a long time developing. I don't use no-code because of the skills required in developing. I use no-code because it accelerates your development. It gets you from where everybody starts to where everybody needs to go a lot faster. And in focusing on that design to development handover part, that's where Impress comes into the picture. Now, there are many other plugins out there that do a similar thing. But hopefully, as you'll see, there's a little bit of extra sprinkled on top with Impress. For example, once you've built that initial feature for taking the design from Figma and generating the UI components, you then start realizing there's other parts you can bring into the design. You can start touching upon workflow and logic and data, and you'll see a few examples of that in the session today. How does it all hang together? So we start with the Figma design. That Figma design has to be marked up in a way for Impress to work with it. I'll show you that in a second. And so then Impress works directly with Figma, and it takes a Figma design and it converts it into a Wappler project. That's HTML, CSS, App Connect, etc. It puts all that into a Git repository. Currently, it supports GitHub, and so you can then take that Git repository and open it as a project in Wappler, and then begin using it, begin tweaking it, adding more plumbing, etc., etc. So effectively, the Git repository, in this case GitHub, is used as an intermediate proxy and repository for communication between Impress and Wappler. So I'm just going to move on to a demo. The demo is in 4 parts. At the end of each part, I'll stop and ask if there's any questions. This is Impress. I've already logged in. This is my projects view. Currently don't have any projects. So what we're going to do is we're going to create one. But before we do that, we're going to draw something. So this is Figma. Should any of you have not seen it before, it's a blank canvas. I'm going to create a frame. Put this frame down here. I'm going to switch this frame to be an auto layout frame. I'll explain that in a second. And I'm going to call this frame index. And I'm going to give it a tag inside of square brackets of desktop. So what we have in front of us right now is effectively the minimum you need to do to get something to work with Impress. You need to create a frame, it needs to have a name, index is the default one you can give it. You need to tag it as effectively a device type that's going to, device kind of size that's going to render to in that square bracket, and you need auto layout. Auto layout is really useful for basically assuring that whichever device or whichever screen size your app is rendered on, it should fit nicely within that. Obviously, a blank square is not that interesting, so I'm going to write some text. I'm going to say, I am a label. That's a little bit small, so let's make it bigger. There we go. So we've written that. I'm also going to write another one. It says, oops, underneath. I want to change the format layout to go downwards. There we go. I am a text input field. So we've added two items. Now we need to go over here and mark them up. So this one, I'm going to add a tag that says label. And this one, I'm going to add a tag that says input. So that's our design created. I'm going to take the Figma URL from the top. I'm going to go over to our projects view, press the plus button. And you'll see that it says, in order to add a project, you need to supply a Figma design URL. We now have one of those. You need to provide Impress with access to Figma if the design is not publicly shared. In this case, it will be. I think by default, anyone with a link, the links are publicly shared so they can access them unless you change that yourself. Provide access to an online Git account in which a Wappler project will be stored, and then approve the creation of a new Git repository or manually create manually connect to an existing one if you already have one available. So we'll press continue. We'll put in the URL, we'll press go, and it says, hey, you need to connect to GitHub. Cool, I'll press that button. That goes off, uses OAuth, creates a connection to GitHub. It just did it seamlessly there. I think it's because I've done it multiple times. If it's the first time you're doing it, it might come back and ask you, GitHub itself might ask you a question, but we've passed that step now. And so it's saying, we're going to create this repository in GitHub, Impress demo, say, okay, cool, continue. So what you see here is that a Impress project has been created. It's called Impress demo. It's actually mirrors the name of the Figma design up here. We've got a URL for the GitHub project. We've got URL for the Figma design. I'll touch upon this error in a second. The Figma design is read-only because we haven't set up a connection to Figma just yet, but we can do that in a second. And you also see this as errored. The reason for that is that sometimes GitHub in this project creation is not quite ready for jobs to work on it. So I'm just going to press play, and hopefully this time around it should work. There we go. So we have a project that's completed. Most of the time it completes first time. Oh, I will put a bit more error handling in there for that. But what we can do from here is we can copy the URL, there's a little copy button at the top, copy the GitHub repo. We can go over to Wappler. We can open, clone a project from a Git repository. So we put demo as the name, URL in there. I'm going to create a new folder called demo. And then we clone. We'll accept the updates. Come over to page view, and you'll see here that we have our two components in Wappler. Now, how they are represented over here is that we've got index as our page. It's in a Flex container. And then we've got a header item, which says I am a label. And we've got text input that says I am a text input field. Let's see that in the browser. Annoyingly, that's open in a browser in a different window. So let me just grab that, come over here. And oops. There we go. There we go. So a label and a text input field. Now, I could sit here and demo every single tag that you can add to items inside of Figma and what they represent in Wappler. But instead of that, I've actually got documentation here that explains it all. So if you click on the documentation link, you can scroll down and it lists out all the different flags that you can use in Figma for Impress. And also got a kitchen sink example. So this actually shows a lot of them in action. So Figma design for it is here. But what I'm going to do is click on this link in a second. So since the last time I demoed Impress, it was a lot harder to get projects set up. A piece of work that I've done since then is to introduce a quick setup concept. So if you click this, rather than having to go off and create access keys and copy and paste a lot of items, as you'll see, it's just effectively a 3-click process, and then your project is up and running. So let's click kitchen sink. Similar messaging comes up and says provide Impress with access to Figma if we need to, and then approve the creation of the GitHub repository. Press continue. It's going to create kitchen sink for us. Press continue again, and that job is kicked off. So one thing I didn't show actually is that we did start here with a Git repository that didn't have any repositories in it. We refresh, you see this jumps up to 2, and we now have our Impress demo and our kitchen sink repository in there. Come back. This job should finish. There we go. Take the link, come over to Wappler. Let's open that project up. Kitchen sink demo. Paste that in there. Go back. Great. Open and clone. We'll accept the updates. Press index here. You can already see we've got lots of good stuff shown in the screen. And over here, we have a ton of elements that show you exactly all the different types that the Impress flags support. So if we open that up in a browser, again, it's open in the wrong window. So let's come back over here, refresh that. There we go. So we've got our kitchen sink example. You can see things like this is a header element in Wappler. This is a button. This is text that wraps. We can open a modal. We can open a side nav. Got some repeating elements in here. And then if you move down, you've got your various input fields, etc., and including rich text down here. So we can do hello world, and we can highlight some of that, and then we can underline it. So at this point, I'm going to ask if there's any questions. Cool. Okay, if there's not, then we'll continue.
All I have to say is wow.
Thank you.
I've got one quick question, Scott.
Yes.
Will it be always limited to GitHub, or will there be the facility to connect to other Git options, most notably self-hosted ones?
Yes, there will be other. It will support connecting to other Git repos. We chose GitHub as kind of the first one to roll with. I've used Bitbucket many times in the past, And so, you know, I will make it available for connecting to other services. But having got it working with GitHub, that allowed me to then continue with pulling all the other features into place. But yes, depending on how soon the demand is for that, I can get that. I can get that supported. Any other questions? No? Cool. Right, we're going to step up another level now. So I've come back over here. I'm going to go to the home page. So on the new homepage, we've got some examples that represent the art of the possible. So I've got a chat-like app, got a report template, and for any of you that might have seen a previous demo, previous video, etc., we've got a task manager in here. But what we're going to do is we're going to look at this chat-like app. So similarly, I'm going to create this project and get it going. So I press continue. It's going to create that in GitHub. While that's running, just going to go back to the home page here, and I'm going to open up the Figma design. So there's a couple of key things I want to pull out on this. First of all, in Figma, it has component support, and the components aspect is outstanding, especially in the inheritance of when you change something in the component. If there are other components that inherit from it, that just ripples all the way through. It's a really, really powerful mechanism. Also things like variants, etc., and now the new variable stuff that they got inside of Figma. So if you've got your components from there, you can then just drag them onto the frames and build different forms of UI. Now you'll see here, this one is index again, but it's got desktop. Got a vertical bar there. This is the first example of showing how you can have multiple flags associated with an item. And in this case, I've given it a title. So when this is built, what you'll see is that the title of the tab at the top of the page will say chat-like app. The other thing is that we have some other views here, and these are also called index, but one of them has mobile and one of them has tablet. Now, when you're building an application inside Wappler, the default kind of UI manager there is Bootstrap, right? But when it comes to Figma doesn't really know about Bootstrap, doesn't know how to kind of render those type of components that allows you to build one UI to kind of rule them all. But what it does do is allows you to build different UIs, and so that's what effectively I've done here. I've built a view for mobile, a view for tablet, and a view for desktop. I quite like this approach in that it helps you to focus on what is the best user experience for that different device type. And so what you see here is that we've got these components. I've dragged them onto the different sized views. Over here, we've got an input field on the left. We've got some messaging on the right. In this one, we've got the messaging and the input field on the right. And then in this one, they're all combined together. And so if you build an Impress application with pages where it has the same name, but these different kind of device types you want to render it to. If we go back to the project, so we come back here, so we've got 3 projects in there now. Inside app, there we go. Take a copy of that. Create a new project again. Chat demo. And clone. Set the updates. Come over here. You can see we've already got something rendering in there. So if we come back over and we reload this, you'll see that this now shows as it did in the design. However, embedded in some of these components, I've already added additional flags in there that do some clever stuff. So for example, I could type messages in here, and you see that appears there. Now, it's not a full-blown chat client. What it is every message just alternates, me, you, me, you, me, you. Under the covers, there is a list or an array, and this displays all the messages in that list, and this just appends to them whenever you type a message. But I just wanted to show some of the kind of the more advanced capability you can start adding in there with some of the tagging, because this design came directly from Figma. But then the other aspect I've shown you is the different kind of real estates of the renderings. So we've got, see the desktop view, and then we've got your tablet view, and we've got your mobile view. Bring them all back up. There we go. Right. Are there any questions now?
I assume there's no limit to it, as in the way you've got your desktop, your tablet, and your mobile designed. Figma's doing all the work.
Correct. The beauty of this one, and it really shows off the kind of the use of components really well. All of these are just the same component, and so you can just drag it into the different real estates. And there's also another one. I've created another one. So as well as desktop, tablet, and mobile, there's wide as well, which you can build for wide, super wide monitors. But the key thing is that it's up to you if you want to use them. If you don't use any of them, if you miss tablet out here, then it'll just alternate between the desktop and the mobile view, etc. Or even if you just create one, it'll just use that in all the different screen sizes for you. But this is a really good example of the power of well, not only the different kind of device types you can build for in Figma, but also the really, really powerful componentization that it offers up to you.
And is that all done from media queries or using the MD Bootstrap classes?
It's media queries. Yeah, so in the page, sorry.
Not the Bootstrap ones built in. It's using its own media queries.
It's using standard media queries. So if I come back over here to the app, you'll see we've actually got the three designs all sitting alongside each other. And so you can go in and you can tailor the respective parts of each design. But when the screen size changes, some of those designs will be turned on and some will be turned off.
So the input is created 3 times.
It is, yes.
Is there an issue with IDs?
There is, or there was an issue with IDs. And so in this case, I created this example a little while ago. So I went in and changed a lot of the items myself to remove the clashing of the IDs. But in some of the newer examples, and the example I'm going to show you next, I've introduced the concept of the tilde. So if you use a tilde before the name of a component here, message box. So if you use a tilde here, it's in view, if it's only view mode, so I can't change for. If you put a tilde at the start, then it will give it a unique a unique name as it goes through Impress. So any components that you want to reuse in different screens, you just give them a tilde at the beginning of their name, and then Impress manages the uniqueness of that for you.
And sorry, I'm doing all the talking. Apologies for that.
That's right.
Is there the option to use the standard Bootstrap classes instead if we want to?
There could be. At the moment, it's not built that way, but there's nothing stopping me from implementing that.
Cool. Superb. Absolutely superb.
Cool. Any other questions? No? Okay. So,
I just wondered, how are the class names? Are they something to do with your tags, or are they just generated automatically?
So the way it's done is that items of interest in here, obviously there's a lot of frames, etc., that effectively map to divs inside of Wappler. So items of interest, which are items that you've tagged, they end up in the tree over here, so you can see them.
Right. Yes.
Items you don't really care about, and that's done basically by either mapping to Wappler items that present themselves in there, or in some cases just adding the deflex class to it, such that it'll present itself up as a flex container in there. And I'm talking about divs predominantly here. But for any other items, the IDs are basically the IDs used are the Figma IDs for that item. And so what that gives you is a unique ID for every artifact out of the box. And so it's only the ones that you've tagged that show up over here that will ever have that potential of having a clash in ID. And so if you add a tilde before their name, that problem goes away also.
But I was thinking, for example, class underscore 17 underscore 51 deflex is, I see that the deflex, but is that somehow, is that linked to an object in Figma? I don't know Figma.
Yeah, it is.
Or is it generated automatically, sequentially, or something?
No. So this FID is a Figma ID, and so so you'll see that those numbers are the same, right? So every item in Figma, even though you can't see it, and in fact, even though you can't get to it by the UI, every item in here has a unique identifier, and that's really useful in the Impress and Wappler kind of interactions, where once you've generated a design out to Wappler, if you start tweaking that design, you start adding attributes to it or start adding children under it. When you run Impress again in the future, you actually want those attributes to persist. And so because those items have a unique design, a unique identifier in Figma, irrespective of where you move them on the page, they keep their identifier. You can use that Figma identifier when it comes back into Impress to say all these extra bits that have come from Wappler, these, I might have changed the way this thing looks, but it's going to keep all that extra addition that the Wappler's added to it. And so the ID is used for that. Now, what I've done over here for the styling for this item, once upon a time, I had it as ID, but I flipped it a class, but I think I can put it back to ID now because I was trying to solve a different problem in the past. But basically, each item has its own unique class that is based off the unique identifier from Figma. And so all of the styling that's associated with this item is inside of I can't see it. How do I get this thing to disappear up here? I'll go up. The bar has come down, so I can't see the top. But basically, there's a CSS file that corresponds to each of the pages, and inside of there's classes that contain the styling for each of these div elements, etc.
So will you end up with? Obviously, you don't want to change those because they're linked. But will you end up with a great many styles for every sort of item on the page? Will in some cases will it duplicate things rather than realizing that certain objects have the same styles? Will it just create one for everything?
Correct. So right now, it creates one for everything.
So you end up with an awful lot of the styles.
Yes, you do. Yes.
Yes. Yeah.
But with some optimization in the future, that can be brought back into classes that are shared across the various items.
Right. And do you think there would be a way? You mentioned about the forms being duplicated. Obviously, what once you make them link them up to things, it's going to just generally a bit more. It's going to be extra maintenance, isn't it? Having 3 versions of things rather than using bootstrap classes. Do you think that's something you'll sort of consider changing so it can somehow create the responsive classes that mean you don't have to repeat chunks of forms, for example? I mean, chunks of code.
Yeah, yes is the example. I'm probably not going to ever be able to replicate kind of the column logic and intelligence that comes with Bootstrap inside of Figma. But what I can do is obviously, I've already said I'm using media queries. You can create one view and you can have different components that will render differently on different real estates, etc. So that's how I would approach that. And that's definitely been on my mind for a while. Just haven't got around to it yet.
I've got one more question, Scott. Is the idea of this that you do the Figma to Wappler migration once, and then if you start then editing in Wappler, you can no longer go back to Figma because Figma would then overwrite some of what you've changed? Or is it a two-way?
That's an excellent question. So it's designed to work in whichever way suits you best. So what does that actually mean? Got this bar. How do I hide this bar? There we go. No, hide floating meeting controls. Boom. Right, gone. Cool. So the answer to your question is that in Impress, there's a toggle up here, and it says Figma first or it says Wappler first. So you can start with a template or your own design or whatever, and one of the templates I've already shown you. You can generate the Wappler items, the artifacts from it. And you always have the ability of kind of going, completing the circle. So you even if you add some stuff in Wappler and it's on Figma first, it'll still keep those Wappler items for you. But it decides that if there's anything that's done in Figma that's different to what's been done in Wappler, in this case, it will choose to keep the Figma change over the Wappler change. If there's changes that do not clash, then both will get merged. So effectively, if Wappler's where you want to spend you want the golden source of truth, effectively, you can take a template, you can run it through Impress, put this into Wappler first, and any changes you do in Wappler are priority. You can still go into Figma, you can still make changes, but if any of those happen to clash with what you've done in Wappler, it will take the Wappler option first.
But it won't update the Figma design, presumably. So if I add a line of text in Wappler, that's not going to appear in my Figma design. I would need to add it in Figma. And
yes, absolutely. So Figma and the Figma API, which is what I'm using here, is only read-only. There is from a REST API perspective, you can never write back to any Figma design. If you build a plugin that runs inside of Figma, you have that ability. But in this case, where I'm drawing from the external REST API, only ever read-only from Figma. So effectively, you would treat you treat your design as the golden source for the UI for sure, and then any plumbing and anything else, any other artifacts you add in Wappler will continue to persist. But if you make any UI changes in Wappler, that's not going to keep through because you can't write that back into Figma, unfortunately. There are many times on each Figma update, I look at the API to see if they've changed it, so you can actually go back and write the changes. Because if and when they do that, then the answer to your question is completely different. Could it be that yes, it will write back to Figma?
Yeah.
Okay. Any more questions? No? Right. So now we're going to step into a little bit of an experimental zone. And so we've already seen the component aspect of Figma and how powerful that is. But what I'm going to do is come back over here. And even though this is an empty canvas, I've actually got some stuff preloaded over here, some assets. So I'm going to copy those. Just going to paste them next to it. And then I'm going to take these ones and I'm just going to put them inside of here. See, that's a little bit smaller than you want. So there we go. So while I'm just going to kick off a job in Impress for that. Go back to our original Impress demo and press play. So what we have here is Figma components, and they've been built around I should be up there. Looks pretty up there. They've been built around an old concept of a message bus. And so the idea here is that you can use Figma components and you can drag them into your design. And there's a way for them to seamlessly talk to each other, so to wire them up. And so what we have here is anything in a blue border will send a message, and anything with a black border around it will receive a message. In this example, it's just one message type, but the flexibility here is to have many different message types, different IDs, etc. But I've implemented a message bus in Wappler that allows these Figma components to just be dragged onto a canvas and seamlessly all interact with each other. So let's see if that works. So run my job, come back over here, go to demo, pull down the latest code. There's our items, come back over here, refresh, kill this one, refresh. And so this one, press and count. If I press that, you'll see the components are responding to a count. If you press this one, a true value is sent out. And if you press this, it sends out the word hello world. You can jump between these. So as I said, this is an experimental territory here, but the goal is to enable more of that connectivity to be represented inside of Figma and inside of your design, instead of having to go and manually thread these things together. Any questions? No? Okay. So one thing I forgot to say is, when I said there's a message bus, the underlying concept here is something that is abbreviated to PubSub, but effectively that means publish, subscribe. So these components up here in blue will publish messages, and these ones in black subscribe to them, and that allows them to talk to each other seamlessly without having to wire them up. Right. If there's no questions, I'll take to the final part of the demo. And so this kind of brings it all together, I guess. So where we started, for me, no code, it wasn't about a skill aspect. It was about accelerated development. And so being able to get a lot further quicker. The reduction of the design to development handover in using Figma designs and generating them into Wappler code, again, accelerates that capability. This aspect here, the connectivity of components that can talk to each other via messages, that theoretically allows you to dynamically connect more components inside of Figma so they can work with each other. So it's really flexible and powerful messaging system there, rather than having to kind of hard code that or manually go and make that stuff happen. So again, it moves you closer to kind of getting more of this stuff done earlier. But finally, the other aspect is when you build something, you typically need to put some content in there. And so the kind of champion of content generation right now is ChatGPT. So if I load this thing up, what website shall I build? Anyone got a keyword? Anyone want to give me something?
Dog wash.
What was that? Sorry, dog wash.
Dog wash. Yeah, washing dogs.
Dog wash.
I bet you didn't expect that.
Didn't expect that one. Neither did ChatGPT. Dog wash services. Our dog wash services are designed to keep your furry friend clean and happy. Basic wash, grooming package, etc., etc. So what you're seeing in front of you is the culmination of all of the steps that came before. We've got a design that is in Figma. We've got components that are designed to receive messages of information that they then present themselves. And those components can be as complicated as you want them to be. Each one of these is a separate component that receives a specific piece of information that it then does something with. And then finally, I built an endpoint that will call ChatGPT based off whatever report or whatever information you're asking for. The response that comes back is in a specific format, and it then chops that up, fires that out as different messages into kind of the UI. Each of the respective components then grabs its part, renders it on screen, and then you've got effectively a dynamic website that's built for you using ChatGPT.
Where did the design come from?
The design, I built it.
Yeah, as in, no, the dog wash services where we've got the black and the orange or gold. Is that because you've got a Figma style sheets, styling already preset?
Yeah, so it looks like. Oh, it's opened in a different browser. Let me come over here. There we go. That's the template. That's the template I've used. Each of these are components. The components are built using that mechanism for saying, I want a message of this type. And then we go off to ChatGPT, response comes back, and then it's sliced up and kind of published out to each of the components that wants to see it. I can demo it again if somebody else wants to give me a different topic. I'll make one up. Pens. There we go. Depends. So yes, as you see, it's the same website design, but it's just based off that one template that I have. It could be any template. It could be a template of your own. It could be a template that you grab off the web. And as long as it's marked up in a way where it can be used with Impress, then you get this capability given to you. Any questions?
No, just impressed with Impress.
Cool. Okay, so let's come back to this here. So a call to action. If you are able to sign up and try this stuff out, it would be very much appreciated. You go to impress.dev. There will always be a free tier for this, but clearly at some point it would be nice to get it in to get to the point where it can have price tiers. But early adopters will get preferential rates if and when that ever happens. And there's a YouTube channel. It's got a few videos on there. I've created a new one that I think was released literally yesterday that explains the quick project setup in Impress. That quick install that you've seen today. And there's a Discord channel which we use for support questions if anyone has any problems when they're using it. Other than that, thank you for allowing me to demo. And if there's any other questions, I'm ready to answer them.
Yes, may I ask one more question?
Of course.
In the previous example,
Yeah.
you wrote "Hello World," and there were 3 different font types. Where do those font types come from?
So these font types come from, let me hide this again. Here we go. Come over here. So these fonts are Figma fonts. And so this is Luxurious Script. This one is Permanent Marker. And this one is Macondo Swash Caps. I believe, well, because I know, I'm fairly sure that Figma basically uses all of the fonts available on Google Fonts. So any font that's selected in here, I just effectively map to the corresponding one in Google Fonts. So the power of that is that when you're using Figma and you're using any of its fonts, you can be fairly confident that it's going to be able to render in whatever you build on your web page. That answer the question?
Yes, thank you very much. Amazing, though.
Thank you.
How many hours would you say you've spent getting to where you are now? Purely out of curiosity. And I bet you don't know, but.
So it's like, it's astonishing how your questions lead into something that I had planned or I forgot that I should say and will say. So to answer that question, I've been working on this for about a year. Now, that's not full-time necessarily, but the main driver for this is that I have another project. And that project is developed with my brother. And my brother is, he's effectively the main user of Impress. So in him building this project, our project, he's been driving me to kind of fill in the gaps and add features and fix bugs for Impress itself. And by sheer coincidence, my brother has joined this meeting today. So Craig, will you put your hand up and say hello to everyone, please?
Hello, everyone. I was attending just to be able to ask some difficult questions, but he unfortunately did a good job.
You want to ask my brother a question?
What's left on the to-do list?
Well, there's 2 to-do lists. There's the Impress to-do list, and there's our application to-do list. But just to build on what Scott was saying, it's very much been a parallel development exercise, and I'm not traditionally a developer. I'm a consultant by trade, involved in decision support, often using predictive simulation or predictive digital twins. So what I wanted to do was create applications which exploit my domain expertise. So one of the domains we're targeting is around oil and gas. So it's it's an LNG logistics supply chain application that we've developed. And I think just to say that the Wappler has enabled me, a non-developer, to create something that I couldn't have developed without it. Obviously, I've been working in parallel with Scott. But because I've been the primary user and contributor to Impress, it's to the point now my workflow of Figma, Impress, Wappler, I don't think I could change that workflow now. I don't think I could use Wappler in its native form because I'm so ingrained in Figma being part of that workflow, such that any design changes, any additions, be it text boxes, be it cells, be it images, be it whatever, I'll do that in Figma and then go through that workflow to get it through to Wappler where I do the plumbing. So yeah, it'd be interesting to see if I could even do a Wappler project just using Wappler now. Such is my ingrained nature in that workflow now, and it's worked really well for me. Yeah, and again, it's just enabled me as a non-developer to make more progress than I ever could previously. I could have dreamed of being where I've got to using traditional methods.
Excellent. Makes sense. I'm glad I'm asking the right questions. I feel like a Steve without being told in advance.
Oh,
We'll
no,
slip you that money later.
Yeah. Do you have another one? No, your questions have been excellent today. They've really helped to open up some of the areas that I even forgot to kind of write down to share with you guys. So, any questions from anyone else? You can ask me, or you can ask the kind of primary user of it, my brother. No? Okay. Well, in which case,
perhaps, just if we were to compare development within Wappler to the design within Figma, then replicating over into Wappler and then doing the appropriate tweaks. I'm thinking particularly, I do a lot of back-end stuff, so integrating that. What sort of timescale improvements do you think that process will give us using the Figma design? Or would you perhaps say that at the moment Figma is better suited primarily the front end than perhaps the heavily data-driven sites?
Yeah, in kind of the workflow that you've got there, nothing would change from the back end perspective. You would still do everything the way you do it in Wappler. The opportunity you have is that if you start with a design in Figma, or if you want to create one and then use that, you do have that kind of complete circle where you've got a version of your app that's drawn. You can add all the back-end plumbing to it. And if you want to change that drawing, you can go into Figma and you can use what Figma's good at to complement, to remove, to change completely, to componentize, change styles, use design systems. That's the power that you get from the UI perspective. From a kind of stepping into no code and for people who certainly do not have any development experience and want to maybe create something, entrepreneurs or startup kind of founders, etc. The experimental stuff that I've shown you here is kind of leaning towards them. It's trying to give them more capability and more opportunity inside of Figma. But ultimately, wherever you start with no code and low code, there comes a point where you need a little bit more than what it offers. And so it's a stepping stone towards, no code leads you to low code, which leads you to code. So you learn along the way, but you can start somewhere. You can start in that no code space.
Yeah, certainly I'd say a lot of benefits for me. I spend a lot of time doing the server side things. I'll be honest, I'm not a good designer. And in fact, I'm pretty terrible if the truth was known. And I can really see benefits in being able to do the design through Figma and integrate that design through and then leave my skills, which is really the back end stuff, to be able to do the more technical bits in the background. So I say they do sit together very well.
Yeah, and I'm with you on that one, which is you saw my AI generated website. The design for that is not the greatest. I don't have the best design eye, but I can one of the powers I have is that if I see a good example, then I can in Figma mostly replicate that as long as I got permission for it, etc. But you know, as kind of, I guess, as you were alluding to there, with Figma, it is the de facto tool for designers out there. So if you want to get someone to draw a really nice design for you, it's likely to come in Figma. And if you just want to get going and turn that design into something real and put the back end stuff in there, either you mark up that design with the Impress tags, or they use a design system where those tags or flags are already in there, or they learn it themselves. But either way, you can ultimately remove that design to development handover, and then allow you to, you know, focus on the wonderful world of the back end plumbing.
Scott, have you done any performance testing on like page load speed?
Not particularly. I've got a few websites running with this, and they don't have any detrimental performance impact that is visible in any form of usage. But saying that, as has been spotted and kind of picked up in this call, there are certainly optimizations that can be done. Some of the ID stuff that's embedded in some of the HTML tags in a production environment, you might be able to strip those. You can strip some of that stuff out theoretically, because there is a tiny bit of a debug in there. And on top of that, some of the consolidation of the CSS classes, etc. All of that is just code, right? So that you know, all of that can be done. It's just time and effort and prioritization of getting it to that point. But this comes back to that call to action. Anybody wants to try it, and if you want to try it like properly in anger, if there are things that you need done, then I will take those and I will prioritize those first, because I don't want to have to make the prioritizations up myself anymore. And obviously my brother's giving me good steer on it as well, but I'm really looking for a wider audience to kind of tell me what's the next best feature, what's the biggest bug that needs to be fixed.
It's truly
right
fed
now.
up with me.
Yeah. No, I love my brother. Yeah, that's what I'm looking for. I want this platform to be used, to be hardened, and to move in the direction that it needs to move into, which is not a direction necessarily that I can pick sat here at home, even though I do use it for you know, other app development, as does my brother, and as does some of the community. We've got a small handful of users off the back of the last presentation I gave, and it'd be nice to get a few more, even if you just go in and dabble a little bit and just tell me, oh, I can't use it because of this reason or whatever. And as I said, anyone who uses it now, wherever this goes in the future, you will always be remembered. Like, you will not be forgotten.
I've just
Scott?
registered, Scott.
Excellent. Excellent.
Scott, can you put up your call to action again so it's displayed in the video?
Call to action. Sign up now and try it out. Impress.dev. There will always be a free tier, so don't worry about the fact that
You want to bring the screen up?
Oh, is it? Oh, sorry. I hadn't shared it. Yes, I took the screen right. There we go. One more time.
Yeah, and, Craig was saying something about he's the better looking younger brother. I don't know. Being in your family must be tough.
It's stated the obvious
He
now.
is my younger brother. He's younger by about 15 months. We have another young brother as well, Christian. So I'll name check him now. He's 9 years younger than me. But he hasn't found the love of Impress and Wappler yet. But one day.
Very good.
One more quick question, if I may. I'm trying to remember. I think I asked this last time, and I think the answer was it's Node only. But is it Node.js only, or the fact that it's front end? I'm hoping it's kind of agnostic, but the page structure was very much Node.
You did ask this question last time, and I'll give you the same response,
Same
which
answer.
is I've not tested it on any other platforms, but because it is front end only, it should work on those other platforms. I don't see any reason why it wouldn't. And if it doesn't, I'll fix it, and we'll get it working for you.
And my last question, if you were starting a new project tomorrow, would you be torn as to whether or not you start in Figma or you start natively in Wappler, or are you like Craig, now set in, I'll do everything from Figma first?
Yeah, my development process has been for a while to do the design in Figma, and so that's where, especially in developing Impress and using Impress for other projects, that toggle Figma first or Wappler first. I live in a Figma first world.
It's
But
worth
I
saying
knew
as well that we all know that if you want to confirm a design is relevant, you want to engage with stakeholders, and that's one of the benefits of Figma, that you can put these designs out there. You can chat to stakeholders, and they can give the sign off as to whether something's acceptable or not. At the design stage, you don't want to develop something, then show a stakeholder, and then say, well, it's not quite right, and you have to kind of change all the plumbing. So in a conventional sense, that design is the thing that you okay with your stakeholders before you then commit to developing it. So from that alone, I know you heard from me, from that alone, I think for me that makes sense that you would start in Figma anyway.
Cool.
Excellent. Well, I think we've near completing the hour. Thank you for everyone's time. Thank you for all the great feedback I had from the last time I presented. What you have seen today is the fruits of the labor from all of that feedback, in fact. And I look forward to hearing from more of you when you do get your hands on this, and tell me what you like and tell me what you don't like. But apart from that, have a great weekend. And again, thanks very much, everybody.
Thank you very much, Scott.
Thanks,
Very
Scott.
much
Yeah, and you, Craig.
appreciated.
Cheers.
Thanks, Scott.
Cheers. Bye.
Awesome, Scott. Thank you very much. For all you folks interested in Wappler out there, we meet the first Friday of every month at 4 p.m. Netherlands time. You can find information about our Wappler meetups on the community forum and also on the Wappler YouTube channel. I want to give a shout out to Ben Plaisir from Down Under for making sure that these videos make it to YouTube. And I wish everybody a very safe and prosperous weekend. We'll see you next month.
Bye.
Thanks a lot.